Welcome, 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 welcome. So excited you could be here with us today. If you don't know me, I'm Colin Campbell. I don't really know what my title is, but I'm sort of a general manager at Sales Hacker. I lead the team. And if you don't know how we do things, how we do webinars and community events at Sales Hacker, you're about to find out. So be excited. If you've been here before, then you know the drill. Go down to the bottom, because we know you're here in the live version for a reason. You showed up because you wanted to interact and have some conversations. Open up the chat, and then you see that little blue thing. Make sure the blue thing says panelists and attendees, so you can all see each other's conversations. And please introduce yourselves. We want to know who's with us today. And everybody else that's watching the recording later, sorry you can't take part in these fun conversations that are about to happen. Try to make it to a live one sometime. We'd love to have you. Introduce yourself, folks. We want to say hi. While you're typing, because I know you're typing, I'll also quickly just say, you know what you signed up for, right? But as a reminder, we're talking about building a revenue operations organization and maturity, and we have some awesome guests to talk us through it. I'll let them introduce themselves because they've got an amazing game plan for us today. And also just a quick shout out to Erin O'Neill, who's here. She's the head of community at Rev Ops Co-op. Close friends. Hey, Erin. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
This is going to be fun. Hi, Casey. Casey Henry's here. She's a marketing ops manager, or he. Casey's one of those names. I don't know. Sorry, I assumed. Welcome, Casey. She. Hi. Renee Burrell, lover of all things ops. Hey, Renee. Thanks for being here. The rest of them must not have fingers. They can't type. Say hello. Hi, everybody. Come on. All right. So here's what I'm going to do. We're going to kick this off. I'm not going to do all the waiting stuff. We're 2 minutes in. That's already too much intro. So we're going to kick off. If you have questions or you just want to say something, drop it in the chat and I'll make sure you get an answer. Cool. Let's go.
All right. So thank you for joining us for building RevOps from the ground up. I did not realize that I dressed to match my presentation this morning until I started editing it. So I'm very on brand with Funnel IQ. So we're going to introduce ourselves, talk about why even do revenue operations over the siloed operations. Where does RevOps belong? Where should it report to? What belongs in it? And then we'll talk through solving some common hiring hurdles that we've run into. So my name is Camela Thompson. I have 15 years in the tech industry and specifically in operations. I was doing operations before RevOps was a thing. So I spanned marketing, sales, and customer success. I joke that I'm a recovering operations professional. I am now a freelance writer, and I write for businesses such as Funnel IQ, Rev Ops Co-op, and more.
What's your dog's name?
That is Annie. She is my chief security officer.
She is adorable and also looks like employee of the month in that picture. So proud.
Every month, she's employee of the month.
I'd say that's a noble dog. Love it. I'm Rob. It's nice to meet all of you as well. I was a JD MBA because I didn't know what I wanted to do in the real world and wanted to just hide out and go to school for as long as possible. My last year, I worked for a small VC company and finally got to work with startups and start understanding what it takes to build products and think about TAM and market sizing and everything else. That said, I still became a lawyer so as to not crush my parents' hopes and dreams, but I ran away from that quickly to become a full cycle salesperson. So I was prospecting, selling, account managing, and I was not good at it. Especially for the first few months. So I started reading books and trying to figure out how I could get better and design different processes. And that kind of led me into becoming the first sales ops person at my company. I was lucky enough to work with VCs throughout, including A16Z and USV and Index and SoftBank. So have seen and just been pelted with so many questions about market sizing and ops and how we're scaling efficiently and how we can forecast the future and all of that. So I've had to answer a lot of questions many times. And currently with BehaveVox, we were lucky enough to raise 100 million, and we are continuing to scale quickly. But excited and thrilled to be here.
That's awesome. Congrats on that, Rob.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we dive in, we thought we'd take a little temperature check and see where everybody is in the process of building out a RevOps org.
All right, poll coming at you, everybody. I'll give you a few seconds to answer. This will help us cater the conversation too. So please do let us know where you're at with, like, where you're at with your revenue operations org, because Camela and Rob have. They could make it more advanced for us. They could make it a little more basic for us. Where are we at? 16 of you have answered so far. Let's get 3 more, and then I'll close the poll. If you haven't filled out the poll, please do. All right, I'm not going to get 3 more. Okay, so this is where we're at. About half of us are saying we're thinking about starting a RevOps org, and then more or less a quarter and a quarter of say, we recently established one and we have one, but we'd like to know more. Excellent.
So we're going to start at the top. We're going to talk about why revenue operations. And it was funny because Rob and I met recently and we were going through this deck, and we both were, he just started nodding his head when I hit the slide, because to me, revenue operations is all about bringing alignment, not only to the business, but within operations itself. Too many times being in those siloed orgs, we just walked all over one another when we were establishing processes. Marketing ops would do something that broke Salesforce, and then we kind of had this war going on. Rob, do you want to add some color to this?
Literally my experience, exactly, because I started in the sales ops world, and then later on a marketing ops person got hired, and we both had admin access to Salesforce, and it was just a battle of who updated what last as to what was going to be working that day and what wasn't going to be, because the commands were coming down from each of our individual sides, and so you're just scurrying and running to fulfill those when you're first starting. And if you're not talking, then there's just no way that you can be aligned on what needs to be done.
Exactly. So now we're going to talk about, where does RevOps belong? And this is a really critical conversation because where revenue ops reports to really determines how much sway you have in the organization, how much you can influence the other business leaders, and what your objectives are. So in my experience, and I think Rob and I discussed this, whenever you're reporting to a specific silo, whether it be the CSO or the CMO or the customer success, chief of customer success, your best interests lie with whoever your manager is. It's just a fact of being in a business environment. You want to keep your boss happy. And they're going to have very specific views of what their priority is. Rob, do you want to add to that?
That's exactly. You're going to be meeting with them daily. You're going to not be meeting with the others, and it's just going to be a number of siloed conversations, a lot of times, that aren't conducive to two sides working together. It's almost synonymous with the classic dogs versus cats of, leads and lead SLAs and marketing and sales saying, hey, we gave you the leads, and sales saying, we don't like your leads. Give us different leads. We're not going to work these leads. And the two teams just working off of different numbers and different KPIs that don't necessarily align with what the overall goal is.
So we're definitely not saying to discontinue meeting with these chief people. Like, you need to be embedded in the organization at their level. So you're continuously having conversations and understand what their organization is going through. So one of the drawbacks to reporting to the CFO is that risk of being removed from the front lines so much that you no longer understand the key pain points that your other organizations are facing. However, I think Rob can really speak to why CFO can work sometimes and how that can work.
Yeah, interestingly enough, since I had kind of started the sales ops function at the last company, it was the teams weren't sure where to put the team that we built out because we handled insights and dashboards and some enablement things, and so we swung from kind of the head of sales, VP of sales, over to the COO, and then over to the CFO, and then back to a CRO later on. The CFO is really interesting because it almost took a more consultative path. You're able to swing in. You're incredibly aligned on the numbers side of things, right? So when you're thinking about actual acquisition costs, you're going to be dealing with teams that are trying to break down, okay, what are the salaries? How much time are people putting into this? How can we model all of this out? And a lot of times that modeling and having that experience and seeing how it's evolving is just incredibly useful. But to your point, you can't stop meeting with sales and marketing because the first moment that you're seen as kind of an outsider, it makes pushing all the initiatives so much more difficult and so much harder to align and get off the starting line.
You know, I'm not going to name names, but I even had one sales manager get really suspicious that I was a spy for the CFO. So it can create some alignment issues. So it really is important to establish that relationship. I had like a office cycle, this pre-pandemic, of course, where I would just hit up certain offices every day. And a lot of times I learned about some pretty major things that needed to be addressed that I would have never heard about or would have heard about much later on otherwise.
When you say you hit up offices every other day, you mean you would like Monday is CFO time,
Yeah.
Tuesday is COO time, stuff like that?
Yeah. I just stopped by really early in the day before the meetings really started kicking off. Just, small talk. How's it going? And then a lot of times they just, hey, while you're here. And it was just a really great opportunity to start that conversation.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, in my humble opinion, I really feel like revenue operations should have a seat at the executive table. We can really influence efficiency and revenue output. And the only way we can do that most effectively, I feel, is to have an even footing with the rest of the go-to-market team. So I'll put my neck out there and
declare. Shout out Paul Kallenberger, who says, I asked earlier in the chat, Camela, for those of you who are here, actually, I'd love to see more answers. Those of you who are here, who do you report into right now? If you have an established Rev Ops org, who does it reporting to? Paul said CRO, so shout out, Paul. Way to go.
So that brings us to our next topic, which is going to be a little controversial as well. We wanted to talk through who the CRO is. So in a lot of smaller organizations, we're seeing a trend of either the VP of sales or marketing also being assigned responsibility for the other organization. And every CRO has to start somewhere. I totally understand that. And I think this is a trend that's going to continue. However, when you have somebody freshly in the CRO position out of sales or marketing, in my experience, they tend to look at everything from the perspective that they're most used to. So if I have a VP of sales that's now a VP of sales and marketing, a lot of times we're still thinking kind of on the one-to-one interaction basis instead of the many-to-one interaction basis that we need for marketing. Rob, do you want to add some color to that as well?
Yeah, no, it really is. It's because it's such a new career path, and there are some organizations that are doing CRO schools and the such now. people are coming from so many different walks of life. So it's so critical to start developing a common set of KPIs that span across both sales, marketing, customer success, so that you're never really turning a blind eye, because it's incredibly easy to, because you bring so much knowledge in a certain department, right? And it's hard not to just fixate on that department and to make that the best that it can be, because you know that you can do that already.
Yeah, and I've known some VPs of sales who manage really well in the early stages of the company by helping close. And that's such a tactical, specific thing to do. When you bring marketing on board, you can't have that same microscopic focus.
Yeah, to start planning a little more long term, being a little more proactive, less reactive.
Yeah.
So just really briefly, Tom Crossley in the chat here just mentioned he's reporting up to the CEO. Now, I don't know Tom's title. Tom, maybe you can share a little bit about yourself and your role, but I'm curious, Rob or Camela, if you've ever seen ops reporting into the CEO, and if you have opinions on that in your experience.
I think it's great. Personally, like, as close as you can get to even footing with the other executives, the more leverage you have.
Yeah, I've seen it on a centralized operations model, right? So when there's a bit more of the a central nervous system or a backbone for the entire company that's starting to dole out responsibilities, and then those operational people might then report directly to the CEO. Certainly had a number of meetings with the CEO and late night calls to go over numbers and such, but just on the revenue ops side, haven't reported directly or seen it.
Okay, so let's talk really briefly about what goes into it. We see, and we'll go through organization charts really quickly just to show you the different flavors that exist. So in some organizations, revenue operations is added in addition to the traditional siloed operations departments as kind of a revenue BI team. So I've seen this quite a bit. Their focus is business insights, compensation planning, and budget management. Technical stack, when we do the the centralized Rev Ops insights, technical stack a lot of times goes to IT instead of embedded. But my really strong feeling is that embedding these within revenue operations gives you a closer relationship with the executive team. And through that closer relationship, you're much better able to understand the business problems and how to solve them.
Yeah, just to hop on that, it's so much about the size of your org, which we'll go into, and what is the scale and capability of what you're able to manage, and the technical proficiencies that are necessary. But fully understanding the tools, the systems, the IT, and everything else only better enriches your ability to convey solutions, right? Because you kind of more fundamentally know the problems, how they can be solved, and it starts to train your brain. It's almost a reason that you'd say, like, you should take as many data classes as possible. You should take as many just meetings with new tools, because it's just going to shift your thinking in terms of how to solve problems, right? It just gives you a more fully built out tool set of how to approach things, rather than just kind of saying, like, this thing exists, just ship it off or throw it over the fence, and then someone else can pick it up and handle it.
Yeah, and I've been.
Do you still find yourself? Sorry, Camela, go ahead.
Well, and I've been in a few organizations that have centralized technical stack management in IT. And what was interesting is that the sales operations and marketing operations departments had to redundantly hire. So they had to actually hire someone with a background in those systems to be able to translate the user's needs to the IT team. So you're adding in It's like telephone a little bit. And that was kind of always a source of frustration as somebody who has the systems background, that I couldn't just, here, let me put this in place. It'll be fine.
Yeah, and there's so many nuanced skills with that too, right? I was an internal product manager on the side at my last company for a year, and trying to spec things out for a team of 4 developers, and it was a learning curve, because
Mhm.
there are people that have specialized that in their entire life, for their entire lives, and are incredible product managers, and know exactly how to spec things out and get user stories and use cases and all of that. Um, and when you're really at that point where you're building so many of these internal tools, that's when you have to start thinking about that specialization.
Was there a question, Colin?
Well, I was curious, this is more of an aside. Rob, you mentioned taking as many meetings as possible with, new tools, new options, things that could fit into your tech stack. Do you still find yourself doing that, taking meetings every week?
Yeah, absolutely. It's I love, it might be from doing deal flows in the past and just loving technology, but it's so much fun to just see the angles that different companies are taking and how they're trying to approach issues, because a lot of times they're solving for problems that they've chatted with others and they're experiencing it, and you might have that problem, you've just never had the vocabulary for how to express it, and you've never really seen it visualized with a solution at hand too. So it's one of those things where you should probably leave your credit card at home a lot of times, so you don't just go off and start buying a ton of different tools. But I strongly encourage everyone on the ops side just to take meetings, be super upfront with the salespeople. Always try to say, like, here's how I'd rate this opportunity. Please don't be banking on me to hit quota at the end of the quarter. But it's just such a cool way to look at problems from a completely different perspective, and just to geek out over tools and stats and new ways to look at things.
Renee says, I love demo day. So it sounds like that's a common practice. Yeah, I used to do more of that myself, more from like a marketing operations standpoint. And I do miss it. Maybe I'll have to start making time in my schedule again for it. Do you like have a target? Do you try to do like one meeting a week, or you just kind of take them as they come? You do?
I generally shoot for one a week, and sometimes I'll just fill out forms on websites just to grab it if I don't have a new email in my inbox, or I'll go through like G2 and just look at top rated tools and start working down that list as well. But I think so many ops people, could be a totally broad stereotype, but we're just people that really liked playing with like Legos, or like Legos with like the motors, maybe like connects, and it's like, ooh, there's a thing that I can build. I can follow some instructions, but then I get to add a bit of creativity into it, and now I get to add these motors and things. So you're kind of playing along some kinds of rails, but it gives you enough to be able to really start to scale and build things that you might not realize. And so there's a bit of that childhood fun, at least for me, when looking at all these tools and being able to put them together.
Yeah, cool. That resonates with me. Maybe I should become an ops person.
There you go.
So the previous slide, we talked about different functions, analytics, process management. This is a slightly different way that I really liked how Rob looked at it. Is really pre-op, new op, upsell, cross-sell, and renewal. Do you want to speak a little bit more to this kind of viewpoint?
Yeah, so when we're thinking about structures, I was helping marketing teams in the past, and they've gone through 4 or 5 different structures of how they should position the marketing team, and one of them was a tofu mofu bofu of just like how does the funnel work out. I still can't say it without smiling, but it was kind of funnel-esque. And so one way when thinking about it, and I've never done this for reasons that we'll get into on future slides, but was just, okay, are there ways that you could lay out, if your ultimate goal is making money, and you break down making money as, okay, I can make money from, like new business or upsells or cross sells. There's generally like, or renewals, there's generally like the 4 different divisions. And you start saying, okay, do I have almost like an emissary that is just in charge of that, right? Of like just optimizing that revenue stream for me, and make sure that that is running as efficiently and incredibly well, as possible. And there's some kind of allure to it, because you get this accountability where you're saying, hey, our upsells are crap. Let's, like, who's the upsell person? The upsell person, like, okay, yeah, like I'm on it. It's a little bit of like the why SDRs and AEs and CS, came to be in the first place. So it's always something that I have in the back of my mind. There's a ton of reasons not to do it, but like I like to throw it out there just as like a fun thought experiment.
Well, I really like this visual because it forces you to think through it. And I think a lot of, especially mid-stage companies, it's understanding for new companies to not really think about upsell and beyond because they don't have the customer base. But I know a lot of mid-market companies, they haven't either thought everything through, or they're just kind of fumbling through it. This really forces you to take a more intentional look at the upsell, cross-sell, and renewal motions. So I thought this was great. So traditional org structure: CMO, VP of sales, VP of customer success, and then the operations teams beneath them. Early organization, a lot of times we see a director of ops under the CRO, and we still have these siloed departments. Now, that does follow the funnel structure a bit more closely, but what I also, we talked about this. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit, but we talked about the VP revenue operations is really the BI for revenue ops as an early version, in addition to the traditional operations. And then what I really encourage folks to think about too, this is a slightly different way to look at it, is by competency. So systems teams, they need to be really close-knit, because what you do in your marketing automation platform directly impacts what happens in your CRM. I think getting the analysts together too, they understand what data quirks are upstream and downstream, and that can really help from a report building perspective. And then you have like a traditional deal desk, cross-functional operations analyst that really makes sure that all the teams are working together really well. Then we move into late phase, and this is a later phase of the same thought process where you're doing this by functional group. So you've got systems, insights, enablement, and then kind of a catch-all operations. And then finally, this is my ideal org, basically, is that you have people who are really deeply competent on the platforms. You'll note that there is some specialization here. Personally, having managed both marketing automation and CRM systems and customer success ticketing systems, I don't think it's fair to place all of that responsibility on a single individual. It's not sustainable long term. I think it's good for an individual to have that breadth of knowledge. It's excellent, but I just don't think there's enough hours in the day to fully manage that platform. And then we're going to move to Rob. I thought you could speak to this. It really follows your funnel view.
Yeah. So I first off hope that everyone will immediately go grab this recording, because that last slide is gold. There are so many good thoughts and so many like really important jobs on there, and it's critical to be thinking that way of what can this org look like as we scale a year, 3 years, 5 years down the line to fully be able to support all the other teams, right? So sometimes when you're building out your org on the ops side, simultaneously you should be saying, okay, what does marketing now look like, right? And how are these people supporting them? What is sales now looking like? What is customer success now looking like? And how are these people working better to support them and their scaling and their growth too, right? So it feels less like it's an isolation and a huge land grab, and more of a contextualized story of, I mean, this is realistically what we need. You can't do just one person who's a generalist. And so the other part that's important to break out, similar to what we were talking about before, is that if you have one person who's doing everything, you're going to be searching high and low for like a real expensive unicorn, and guaranteed.
I gotta just. I have to do it.
Yes. I love this one.
This is the unicorn.
It's there's so many skills, right? There's so many sets of different components that people need to know that it's really difficult. Now, that's not to say that you jump immediately to what it is, but it is to say that by breaking it into these kinds of specifics, i.e. like insights, process, systems, enablement, at least to start, you're able to find people that are really going to excel in those roles. As ops becomes more nuanced, more fully fleshed out, it's fair to start saying there is nuance to the different jobs and the responsibilities inherent within each of those. And so on insights, guess what? Like, somebody that is incredible in BI and knows Python and R is going to approach problems in a significantly more structured and intelligent way than an army of one is going to do in just cranking out Salesforce reports. Now, that doesn't mean that you initially and immediately hire the person with the R experience, but it does mean that you should have that on your roadmap for when you're starting to build things out. And insights would be the absolute first place I'd start to bring on people, because if you don't have insights into what's going on throughout the organization, then you shouldn't be taking any other actions, because any other actions that you take, it doesn't mean anything, right? Like you have no baseline with which to compare it to. You have nothing with which to say, oh, this is successful, or like, oh, I should probably iterate and try again. So if you don't have your insights and your numbers preset, dashboarded, ready to go, then you shouldn't be taking all these other steps. From there, you can build process from those insights to help derive those numbers and to help to clean things up. Then once you have process, then you can scale it with systems, right? If you buy a system but don't have a process already in place, then you're just starting from scratch. I mean, you're going to burn time and money because you buy the tool and you don't really know what to do with it to start. But you're also not going to be able to see those tangible ROI increases that you would otherwise see by virtue of having a process in the first place. You know, you should think about, oh my gosh, I can do this much more than what I did do before, or I can do it this much more accurate, or I can expand to this, and this, right? It's like, is it breadth or depth that it's giving you from that system? And then enablement, you want people that can teach, right? Like, should I be teaching a whole bunch of people? Maybe not. But I know that there are incredible teachers that are going to bring things home and then teach these systems, teach these processes to the team from there. And then as you continue to scale, you can think about bringing in planning, which might traditionally just be under, your initial Rev Ops person to start, because they'll have experience in that. But you want to think both about how are you going to scale your entire revenue team internally, as well as what your go-to-market approach is externally, thinking about TAM, thinking about new markets, industries, personas, and ICPs, and all of that. And then on the deal side, depends, completely on what you have, the partnerships that you have with your legal and finance team, but always good to be able to have some kind of commercial counsel, somebody that can work through contracts so that if you have a shared lawyer or external counsel, you don't run into chaos at the end of the quarter or end of the month with everybody trying to get deals closed. Contracts can't get signed because people are redlining. They can only redline, one thing because they're also doing HR issues. That drove me batty as a salesperson. It's like, the deal is ready to go. Can we just get it signed? Right? But no, you can't, because the lawyer in me also said, like, shut up, sales guy. Like, let me just do my thing. So having commercial counsel to think through what is in contracts, like how they can actually evolve, how they can be tokenized so that they can scale better. That's incredible. And having someone on the finance side to really think about commissions, pricing, and all of those components is critical, because money drives behavior, and it's so important to always have an eye on that.
Well, and something I can't emphasize enough is that burnout is all too common in operations. And there are a lot of unicorns, some really talented people out there. And as a revenue operations manager, it is our job to protect them from burning out. And the best way to do that is to have enough resources to invest in analytics systems, the tools they need, and supporting people so that they don't hit that critical burnout. We are kind of coming up on time, so I wanted to check in. We do have information to share on thinking through building a business case for additional headcount. Do people want us to go through that, or do you want us just to point you to more resources where you can get more information on building a team?
I love the check-in. Yeah, folks, leave in the chat. Let us know. Should we talk about building a business case for more headcount? Joshua Davis says absolutely.
Okay.
Daryl would like resources. We could do both. We could send some things, and if you want to hang out and hear about building a business case straight from Rob and Camela, we can do that too. How does that sound, Camela?
That sounds great.
Cool.
So,
okay.
I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead. So the tough thing about building out a revenue operations team is we're often viewed as a cost center and not revenue generating. And because of that, a lot of us have to go through the process of building a business case for headcount and building out a hiring plan. It's not something that comes naturally. Businesses won't assume you need to scale at the same rate of the rest of the organization. Because revenue operations people are talented and great, we tend to work too efficiently and then be kind of punished for it. So what this does is it gives us a tangible way to measure how much work we have on board, how much work we're expecting, and how much work we can handle. And what's really critical about this is that you have some kind of project management system, and it's a pain to keep everything in a place, but it pays dividends, because you can meet with executive leadership and say, hey, these are the key initiatives that we completed. It really proves the value of your organization, and it also allows you to monetize your impact on the organization. So by looking at large projects and estimating how much time you're saving your sales organization, your marketing organization, or customer success, you can actually quantify how much money you're saving the business by addressing the issue. So keeping that in mind, I suggest using a ticketing system, organizing by competency, having some kind of LOE measurement, and a number of hours on average that you spend on the project. And then you can pivot that information and really determine what you're spending your time on. So I also recommend that people have their team record what they're doing all day by competency to figure out where they're really spending their time. And this was an exercise I hated doing. But once I did it, it was really eye-opening, because I always felt that I was spending the most time on the things that I didn't like doing, right, when I was actually spending a lot of time elsewhere. So once you have how much time you're going to spend or need to spend to finish these key initiatives, the current hour allocation by team, so how much you can spend on that, you get the difference in how many additional hours you'll need by competency to address all of your projects. So this gives you solid math that the CFO, CEO will respect and be able to negotiate for more headcount. And I know Rob has a different take, so I'm going to go to the next slide And Rob, how about you give your take?
No, I mean, that part I super agree on. It's the discipline necessary to be able to do that is immense, and it is so important because I know that I switched from sales to ops in order to help my friends be more successful and make money. So it always felt like a rebuke if I said like, no, I can't help right now. And back in the good old days when we could be in offices, I would get into work and have a line because salespeople always beat me to work because they were just searching and finding leads early in the morning. And then there would be a line at my desk to ask questions, right? And so at a certain point, you realize that you're just not tracking what that is. And you have to have some kind of system that is fair and has people starting to sort things through so that you can build these cases for yourself of who you need, where the time is going, and what you're doing. Now, on the customer journey mapping, it's important also because a lot of times that's like, it's the proactive way to handle like reactive tickets and things, if that makes sense. And this part, a lot of times, because all of those issues are pulling you away from kind of these big strategic initiatives, right? That it's taking you away from being able to be super proactive in terms of, my gosh, I would love to delve into XYZ because I think it could make a difference. And so when you're trying to think through, like hand in hand with what was just chatted through, you can be thinking about where should my next big initiatives come from by laying out the customer journey in having every single stage, and then take the same KPIs, from each stage and start to understand the bottlenecks. So what is our funnel size, both in terms of quantity and quality at every stage? What is the conversion rate? What's the makeup, the size, the composition of what they're buying at that point? And how much effort, time are we putting into it? And how long is it taking for that conversion to happen? Right. So like,
if I could just like totally agree with you and hammer that in a little bit, like as you're building your 1, 3, and 5-year plan, talk to your network, figure out what common initiatives happen in businesses your stage, because it is absolutely critical to take initiatives into account when you're planning for headcount.
yes, exactly. And then target the bottlenecks, right? Like, why, if you only have like a couple people purchasing because you're doing huge enterprise deals, are you going to focus on late stage contract amendments and retooling CPQ systems, right? Like, probably not important at that point if you have nobody even coming into your funnel and you know that it's going to take 11 months to even get to that point, right? So think about what the bottlenecks are, and if you are breaking everything down properly, right? High level category, new upsell, cross sell, renewal, or whatever it is, the stages and route to each of those, and then you're piling, or you're backing out and saying, here's where the bottleneck is. That roadmap writes itself for where your initiatives should be lying, and then you can really think about, okay, what is the advancement? What's the degree of awesomeness for each of these components? Am I even at the systems level, right? Or is there not even process in place for these people yet? So it's a really good way to help you to strategize your ops roadmap, and then like the team that you're going to need to bring on to be able to do that. Yeah.
Perfect. So have a plan. Go through immediate hiring needs, 1, 3, and 5-year. Like we mentioned, the ticketing system process, plus initiatives, plus where you identify gaps. That's a great way to form that plan. I will say I've seen way too many hiring managers get blindsided when they extend an offer and their candidate's actually offended. So start with payscalesalary.com and Glassdoor, but talk to your network about market rates in your area that are specific to your industry. So what a system administrator in Seattle will be paid in the tech industry is totally different than the financial sector. So make sure you verify within your industry and area. I don't think we have time to cover creative compensation. But the last thing I do want to say is it's an interview, not an interrogation. A wise mentor told me that my job interviewing is to sell the company and the position. Keep in mind that while, yes, it is absolutely critical that you figure out whether or not they can do the job, it's also very important that you're representing your company in a positive light to attract that talent.
So true. There's also the fact that, like, how much can you really tell about a person from a 1 hour conversation? Or even if you have a multiple stage interview process, a couple of conversations, you can learn a little bit. But for me, at least, and this is, I'm not hiring ops people, but just hiring in general, I spend the time just trying to get to know them and imagine working with them every day. And if I get excited, then it's a go. And if I'm not excited, then it's a no.
And that's on both sides of the conversation. So if you're a hiring manager, your impression is setting up whether or not that person's going to accept the position.
And make them excited to work with you as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Nobody should be limping into a new role. You know, you want everybody to be thrown a party when the person starts.
Yeah.
So additional resources, the Rev Ops Co-op Slack community. I'm on there answering questions quite a bit. Other people are answering questions. It's a great collaborative community. And then the Rev Ops Co-op blog. Actually, most of the images I used in this presentation are in that blog under hiring. So feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much for having us, Colin. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
so much.
Fun.
And one last thing just to mention for everybody, if you like conversations like this, but you want to maybe just get together with like 5 or 6 other RevOps folks, maybe people who are facing similar challenges as you, we do put together, the Sales Hacker community puts together RevOps roundtables. I'll put a link where you can register in the chat. Check them out. Yeah, no pressure. They're pretty fun. We do some group projects and stuff. Sometimes we just use them to commiserate and give each other a pat on the back, maybe have a glass of wine or 4. And yeah, anyway, I'll hopefully see you around. Thank you so much, Camela, Rob, Aaron, the entire RevOps Co-op, Final IQ for bringing this. This was great. Thank you.